6, 7, 8.
Discover, connect, engage, become. Discover, connect, engage, become. Discover, connect, engage, become with CURNcast.
Hey research friends, it's your host Lauren O'Cano, and we're back with another episode of the CURNcast, where we are breaking down barriers to research and making research more accessible for all. I'm very excited for today's episode because we're talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is imposter syndrome in research. It's something I've definitely experienced, and it's something that I don't think we talk too much about, but everybody is going to go through at some point in their research journey. So, without further ado, let's check it out. I would like to acknowledge that the CURNcast is being recorded and created on the traditional and unceded territory of the Tecumloops to Secwepemc within Secwepemcúlecw. I am very grateful to be able to learn, play, and create on these beautiful lands. So we're here with our special guest of the day, Keilin Gorman, who is a TRU alumni. He did his Bachelor of Science and his honors in microbiology, as well as a whole bunch of research, including a UREP, the honors project, as I mentioned, and also a whole bunch of research in psychology. So welcome, Keilin.
Thanks, Lauren.
I'm really excited to talk to you today about a lot of things, and I'm excited because student perspectives are what we're all about here, and learning and sharing from both students who have done research, students who are currently doing research, and students who are interested in getting research. And part of the beauty of sharing that is we can create a synergy and hopefully get more students involved in research because, as you know, there are so many benefits that come along with it. So to get started today, I would like to do a bit of a fun lightning round of questions to warm us up. So how this works is I'm going to ask you a question, think of the first thing that comes to mind, and we try to keep it relatively short, but if you want to go off on a tangent, that's okay too.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question is, what was the last thing that you researched?
The last thing that I researched was probably missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, just to brush up on it for my own learning.
Next question is, do you have a current research interest?
I do have a current research interest. I actually just reached out to some people to do research this summer. So stay tuned for more on that maybe later, but yeah.
Ooh, there's a little bit of mystery there. I like that. I like that. We'll be sure to update our show notes if we get any updates on that. Who is your research muse?
My research muse, that's a good question. I feel like someone who's inspired me to do research is definitely my honor supervisor. So lots of your listeners will know Ann Cheatham. Yeah, probably her.
What do you wish more people knew about research?
I think I wish more people knew that research doesn't have to be as intimidating as it comes off as. So I know when I was thinking about doing research, it seems like this really big, scary thing. And there's lots of ways to get into it and just kind of dip your toe in before you jump in. And that can be a really, really positive experience to start.
And our last question for the lightning round is, do you have any special messages or words of wisdom to share with future TRU researchers?
The one word of wisdom that I've shared before, and I'll share again here, is that I'd really encourage students not to be afraid to branch out into other fields of research. I think that it's easy just to focus on kind of the one field that you're studying or that you're focusing your courses in. But I know for me, trying different types of research that I wasn't necessarily super sure about was a really fun and exciting way to explore different options. So I just say, keep an open mind about different research fields, try something you never would try before, and you'll really find some amazing things.
That's amazing advice. And that's what I think TRU undergrad research and TRU research in general is about, is trying new things. There are so many things that I have got to do and you have got to do that never would have imagined starting at the beginning of undergrad. So let's jump into the regular questions and dive into that a little bit. So for all our listeners who know a little bit about you from some of your lightning round questions and your bio, but we want to know, what's your research journey like? How did you start off in research, and did you always know that that's what you wanted to get into?
Yeah, so I guess my research journey probably started in grade 12, actually. So the program I did in high school, we had to do 3 research projects in kind of our sciences to start. So the very first 2 major ones that I did is in my physics class. I looked at the relationship between the tension and frequency of an oscillating piano chord. So I used to play piano growing up. So that was a really fun little project that I did in grade 12 to kind of get me started on the physics side. And then in chemistry, kind of hinting at my interest in medicine, I looked at the change in stomach acid acidity when you're taking antacids. And then also likewise on the other side with aspirin. So how those two kind of changed an artificial little test tube of stomach acid. So those were really, really tiny projects that I thought were massive back in high school, but were kind of my first little peak of interest that research might be something I'd be interested in. And then if you kind of fast forward into university, so my Bachelor of Science at TRU, in second year after I had microbiology with Anne, she kind of really inspired that piece of research in me again in university. And I knew that that's something I wanted to do, just to see if it would be something I'd want to go into permanently. So like go into my master's and my PhD and do research for my whole life. And I think that this is probably a common trend for lots of people. My third year of university was the really bad COVID year. So unfortunately, I had lots of hopes and dreams of doing research in third year, and that kind of got put to a stop because of COVID. But the summer between my third and fourth year was when I was really fortunate to have gotten the UREAP scholarship, and that's kind of what jump-started my path in research from there on. So I did my research or my UREAP with Anne, and then my honors kind of piggybacked on my UREAP, and that was looking at the effects of cannabinoids on multi-drug resistant bacteria. So that was a really cool experience for me. We got to get multi-drug resistant bacteria from the hospital. So I did feel like a little doctor going in the hospital for my bacteria. And then, I spent probably just over a year doing that project. And I think that's something I'd encourage too, is if you can get on a project that is going to be a really long project, you can really get to know it, really know the ins and outs of it. And that's a really cool way to see if it's something you want to keep doing. And then likewise, at the similar time in the start of my fourth year, I'd had a psychology prof, Dr. Claudia Gonzalez, who I loved her course and I loved her as a teacher. So I just reached out to her to see if I could do research with her. And that kind of also stemmed from a research apprenticeship, which is like a course that I did, and then went into a research assistant program that extended all the way from January of my fourth year right through the summer up until I started med school. So I kind of branched out a little bit, as I mentioned, just try different fields because that's a really cool way to get started.
Welcome to Hit the Streets. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Julianne. This is a segment where we ask strangers weirdly specific questions about research.
Now, let's hear from our first victim. How would you define imposter syndrome?
I could give a scenario maybe. Let's say you get a new job and you're surrounded by really talented people and you yourself think you don't match up with them, yet you still have the same position or level in the hierarchy, I suppose. And you feel like a mixture of guilt and like impending doom because you think you don't match up.
I'd say it's like feeling like you don't belong somewhere, like if you're in a job, you're like maybe, they picked the wrong person, like I'm not qualified for this, like I don't know how to do my job, stuff like that.
Imposter syndrome, I think, involves people feeling like maybe they got to a place without having achieved what they needed to achieve to get there. It's usually not founded and not accurate. People are usually more capable than they think. But definitely, I think it's a pretty common feeling among most people in academia.
Imposter syndrome is when you're somewhere where you think you don't deserve to be, but you do.
And that's it for question 1. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
So I'm curious, it sounds like you were super confident going into all these projects, and something that I hear from people who haven't maybe got involved in research is, how do you get all of these experiences? Where do you know where to start? And how does it just come so easy to you? And in my head, I kind of laugh because going through those things, it actually doesn't feel so easy. And I'm wondering if you ever experienced that, especially starting your research, first getting involved in research, and what that felt like.
Yeah, I definitely did feel like that. It's a scary thing, especially if you're early in your undergrad, that reaching out to profs and asking them to kind of take a chance on you and take you on as a student in their own lab. But I definitely suggest something that helped me was getting to know a potential supervisor a little bit before you ask them about research. So I know with Anne, I volunteered with her quite a bit before kind of asking about research. And part of that was just because I wanted to get to know her before kind of I asked her to be my supervisor. And also I think it shows really well as a student if you are keen about working with a supervisor in a variety of ways rather than them just supporting your research. So that's kind of one strategy I might suggest is try volunteering with a prof, see if you're interested in their research. And then I think the other part, which again, a huge shout out to TRU, is I've never talked to a professor, whether I did research with them or didn't, who wasn't really open to helping direct me or just encourage me to do research. So I think even if you contact a supervisor and they can't take you on as a student, in my experience, they've given me other potential supervisors, or they've given me advice on who else to reach out to better fit my interests. So I think just a really, really big advantage of being at TRU is the professors there are so encouraging of working with students. And if you can just absorb that a little bit and know that the person you're reaching out to wants to help you learn as a research student, that's a big piece of relief that you can take away.
Totally. That mentorship piece, again, is super important. And it's something that it's really strong and has a strong presence at TRU. But yeah, taking that first step can sometimes feel scary, but it's really worth it in the end. So, and I think also combining that with what your interests are too, right? Like if you find a supervisor who's excited about the same things that you are, that can always be a great place to start. So then jumping forward to when you got into the research, was that also just a smooth ride or something that comes up a lot for both myself and when I talk to students about research? It's this idea of imposter syndrome and like, should I be here? Am I good enough to be doing this research? Do you have an experience with that?
Yeah, I guess my personal definition of imposter syndrome, kind of like you mentioned, Lauren, was just feeling like you don't belong there. And I think that is a really deep and tough emotion to feel, especially in research. But I would definitely, one thing that I thought I had to be able to do before doing research was to do research. So I thought I had to like show up in the lab, know exactly what I needed to do, be able to do research independently and put together a project, which was something that was terrifying before I actually started it. But I think the reality of it is, especially in undergrad research, but I honestly think like well into post-grad, you are learning to do research. So your supervisor's there to teach you how to do research and to support you on that research learning journey. So I think that's something that I want lots of students to know, or every student to know, is that when you start doing research, it's a big learning process. So you don't already need to be able to do research. So that's one thing that Anne quickly helped me understand, was she was going to teach me these things and I didn't have to come up with all of them on my own. So that's something that definitely helped me get over a little bit of imposter syndrome starting research. And I think the other part was kind of just having a little bit of confidence. Something that I am really bad at and I want to work on is kind of when I achieve something, I almost think it was just out of luck. And when I don't do so great, or when I'm not successful in something, I attribute it to myself. And I think that's something that's really common with lots of people, especially in research. So I think just kind of looking intrinsically at yourself and realizing that it's a really big accomplishment just to be able to starting a research project, because that's a huge undertaking. So I think it's a combination of just working on yourself a little bit and realizing that everybody has a skill set and has something to bring to their own research project. And then also relying on your supervisor to support you through that process, because they're your teacher, they're your safety net, they're someone you can go to when you're super, super frustrated. So I think a combination of those things definitely helped me get over the imposter syndrome of starting research.
It's totally normal to feel a sense of insecurity doing something new, throwing yourself into the unknown, because with research, no one knows the answer most of the time, and you're navigating it together, and I really like that. It fosters teamwork and collaboration and problem solving kind of as a group. So did you also find that when you had these struggles, or say an experiment failed or those kinds of things, that you learned from that and learned just as much as successful experiments?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest parts about research is it's going to be one of the most frustrating things you'll ever do, but also one of the most rewarding. So I'm just thinking of things in my own project. It makes me laugh now. But just really not silly things that I did, but kind of silly things that I did that have led to a mistake. But had I not gotten to that mistake, I wouldn't have been able to digest my procedure and go through it kind of with a fine tooth comb to find what wasn't working well. So I think those mistakes in research are a huge part of it, and they're so valuable because it's going to make your project that much better, having ironed out those mistakes. So I think that's something always to remember, is you are going to screw up your project over and over and over before you kind of get to that point where you're having success. And that is a really positive thing in research, even though it doesn't seem like it. But I think something for me, I am someone who likes when things work out, and I like when things go according to my plan. And that was a really big learning curve for me in research, to realize that doesn't happen almost ever in research. So I think that really adjusted my expectations, both in research, but also in other facets of my life, that it's okay if things don't go to plan. And that is how I'm going to learn the most and get the most out of my project, is through really thinking critically about what hasn't gone right and how can I improve it.
Hey, welcome back to Hit the Streets. Hear that funky music beat? Let's hear from question 2 now. Can you tell us about a time that you might have, maybe, perhaps experienced imposter syndrome?
When I am suggested to take art classes and I don't feel like I'm good enough at art to be in these art classes with all these talented people. But like, damn, when I look at it, my art not that bad.
I mean, I experienced that with my first co-op job. Especially if it's your first job in an environment that you're not familiar with, it can be scary, and you can lead yourself to believe that you weren't ready for it, you know?
Yeah, I would say that the first time I experienced imposter syndrome was immediately after graduating from my PhD, and when I started to do clinical work. And I realized that what I learned in the classroom didn't always translate exactly, and I was doing things that I had never done before, and yeah, it felt like I wasn't quite ready.
I tend to get fired from most things pretty quickly, so I don't know. I don't surround myself with rather very capable people, so not in many professional environments. I don't know. I'm trying to run this comedy club, and I'm the president, but like there's people far funnier than I am who've already met, but I'm the friggin' president, right? So it's like, do I even have authority here? I don't know. That's how I feel.
Our very first annual teaching and learning conference, the year I was director of a center and I had to give the address to the entire faculty, I thought, yeah, this shouldn't be me, it should be someone else. But it was fine. It was fine, yeah.
I think as you get experience working wherever, you kind of start to realize that most people don't actually know what they're doing, and I find that that's very comforting. I think most people are imposters in their job, and the best way to get through it is to sort of just accept that you're going to make mistakes and you'll learn from it.
With my job, they keep on telling me you're fired, but I keep coming back. I don't know. I never experienced imposter syndrome. I haven't experienced imposter syndrome. I'm amazing. I deserve to be wherever I need to be.
Well, that's it for question 2.
See you next time on Hit the Streets, folks.
You've mentioned that you turn to your mentors for advice on when things aren't going right. Is there any other supports that you use when you're, struggling through research, or just even in academics in general, like when things are going tough?
Yeah, I think like your mentor is always a really great support. I think that friends or other people in your lab group or even different lab groups are a really great support for you as well, because the feeling of imposter syndrome or the frustration that goes along with making mistakes in research is something that everybody experiences. And that is kind of a nice thing to wrap your head around, is you're not isolated. It's not just you feeling like this. So I'd suggest if you're either stuck at some part in your research or you're really feeling that imposter syndrome, reach out to your friends who are doing research too. They're likely feeling the same way, and you can kind of tackle that. Something that I've really learned through more multidisciplinary research in undergrad was, if you have a problem in your research and you take it to experts who aren't necessarily experts in that field of your research, they sometimes come up with an answer much easier than you would, or even that your supervisor would, because they can kind of take their brain outside of the patterns that they see in that field and think about it a little differently. So I'd even encourage, like if you're doing like a research project in biology, for example, ask a friend who's doing research in psychology or sociology or something, because they might be able to think a little bit outside of your biology brain box and can work through that problem a little bit. So yeah, I'd say a big support for me now and for me in undergrad has been my friends or other people in my circle doing research, because it's really, like you mentioned, Lauren, a collaborative thing. Research is such a team-based approach. And I think the more that you lean towards that, the more success and the more relief you'll have going through your project.
So do you still experience imposter syndrome sometimes? I know now you're in medical school, you've achieved this big goal that you've had for a long time. And I think a lot of people have in their brains that once you get to a certain level, once you achieve this certain thing, that all these thoughts and feelings of insecurity and imposter syndrome will just dissipate. They'll just disappear and everything will be good. And I'm curious to know, is that the case for you, or are there still times when you're like, oh, I don't know?
Yeah, I'd say, and this isn't necessarily what people might want to hear, especially if they're keen on going to medical school, the imposter syndrome is much, much worse here in medical school for me. And again, I encourage people not to take that as such a negative thing, because lots of my friends, or really probably everybody in my program, is feeling the same thing. So definitely rely on that. But I remember in my very first week in medical school, it was in Vancouver. So all of UBC was packed into one building or one room. And you listen to the people around you, and there's people who have their PhDs already, or there's people who've been nurses for 5 years and have so much patient care experience. There's even like Olympians in my program. So it was really difficult for me to look around and see all these incredible people with like years and years of more life experience or academic experience than me, and wonder why I deserved to be in that room. So that's something that I think I've worked through a little bit over the past semester, but I think it's definitely an ongoing and dynamic process through your entire life. But yeah, in med school, it's tough because most people who get in will be like maybe the top of their program or have done research their whole life, or they have all these really amazing accolades. And then you come into medical school and everybody has that, or everybody has more than you. So it's really important that you kind of step back. And that's where practicing a little self-confidence was really important for me, to remember that I'm here for a reason and they chose me to be here. So even if it doesn't feel at all that I deserve to be here, somebody out there thought that I did. And that is something that I try to remember almost every day.
I think we've talked about it in the context of medical school, but really it can apply to any program that you're going into, whether that's if you're getting involved in undergrad research, if you're just struggling to be more confident in general, applying to jobs, grad school, anything, and learning to cope with this imposter syndrome and kind of channel the positive side of it is really important. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I really love that. Now, flipping it back to you, I'm curious if you have anything else in the realm of self-confidence and that kind of thing that you like to share with future TRU researchers, TRU students who might be listening about research. Any other last little bits of wisdom that you have?
Yeah, I think kind of on the note of self-confidence is that, especially in research, but as you mentioned, Lauren, kind of in any part of your life, every single person has a really valuable skill set that they bring. So when you're feeling like that little lack of self-confidence or that imposter syndrome and that you're just not enough, remember that you are bringing something unique that only you have. And that is a really valuable skill. Kind of an example that's a little bit more tangent or just makes more sense for medicine is, as medical students, we kind of feel useless sometimes, whether like when we're in the hospital or in family practice, because we haven't really learned that many skills yet. But something that our instructors or our doctors that we're practicing with really encourage from us is that we have more time than anybody in that hospital to spend with a patient. So that is one thing we bring to the healthcare team that is so valuable, is you can sit with a patient for as long as you want pretty much and really get to know them. So I think that example really just shows that no matter what your skill level is or what your knowledge is to a team, you have a really important role on that team, despite all of that. So just try to remember that. And that's a big part of research is you're going to likely be on a research team with people who are all stages of their educational journey. And even if you don't know as much as somebody, or you don't know a specific technique like somebody else does, you are still a valuable member of that team and you have something to bring to that. So that's a really good way for me to kind of keep my self-confidence up when I'm feeling a little bit down. And I'd really encourage other people to kind of think about it in that way too.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I love that answer. And it's totally relevant to anyone who is in that kind of situation where you feel like you're not the expert, you're still learning things. That's so common in research and everywhere. And I really, really like that idea of focusing on what you bring to the table and what you can do to learn and better your skills in any situation, because there's always going to be plenty to learn if there's one thing that I've learned. So thank you so much, Keilin, for sharing your time and being here on the podcast today. I really learned a lot and took away a lot of valuable pieces of info from that. So I'm sure our listeners will as well. I look forward to hearing more updates from your medical school journey. And yeah, just really grateful for a lovely conversation.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm so happy that you invited me today. And I'm always free to come back on if you ever need me for another episode.
I learned so much from that conversation, and I want to say a big thank you again to our special guest, Keilin, for sharing. I hope you'll join us again on the CURNcast, where we'll continue to break down the barriers to research. See you soon.